Okay, so this is the animation that we're going to go for on our Android. It's the idle animation. Once we start the game, you'll see that watching the flash point of the gun, every time I shoot, the flash point comes on. A little bit of smoke at the end of it. And that's what basically the effect we're going to go for. Okay, now in order to get that, we're going to have our assets class open, our game screen class open, our loading screen, our robot, and our animation all open. So again, that's assets, game screen, loading screen, robot, and animation. So we'll start off with the assets class. What you'll need to do here is, well, I created these variables, public static image, MSR1. So mech guy, shoot, right, 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Notice I end it right there. After I create that, I go to my game screen, and then I copy this line here that I just created, right? And then I come back and I paste it at the class level in my game screen, and I change those to private image, MSR1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 6. Once I have that, I create my animation by saying is random right here. You could, of course, name it anything you wanted, but if you're going to follow along with this tutorial, I suggest you do it literally as I did it, even with a capital S. So is random. And then, once you open up that animation, we're going to come down here. And I like to comment everything so I know exactly what goes to what. So mech guy, shoot, right, idle. And then I go ahead and I will have some errors. Well, actually, no, I won't have any errors right now. MSR1 equals assets.msr1. So what I'm doing is I'm making the MSR1 that is in the class level up here equal what the MSR1 in the assets is. So we haven't actually made that worth anything just yet, but eventually we'll assign a value or an object to the assets as well. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and actually construct the animation. So mech guy, shoot, right, idle. We have is random equals new animation, and then of course we add each one of those frames to the animation, all 6 of them. Take note of the time as well. I have 50, 50, 150, 150, 150, 200. If you really want to understand why I did that, you might want to read the Unit 2 Day 8 description of animation, and perhaps it'll become a little bit more obvious to you. And then I come down to the lower part of this class here in the animate method, and I add is random update, and I do it 20. Okay, so moving on to loading screen, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to load the values to those assets. Remember when I said those assets don't have anything really assigned to them? Well, now we're going to. Now the pictures I have, they're called Jughead Idle Attack 001, 002, 003, so forth and so on. So what I do is I say, for the assets class, the variable known as MSR1 in the assets class, let's make it equal a new image known as Jughead Idle, and so forth and so on. So you have that set. Once you have that done, we move to the robot class. In the robot class, we're going to add a class level variable known as firing. It's going to be a Boolean. So if you look right here, I already created that. Private Boolean firing equals false. We're going to assign that to false right away, and we're going to add a couple of methods. I'll explain why I do this in a couple of minutes here. Scrolling on down, I added public Boolean get firing, return firing. So that variable that we just created up top, right now it's false. So if I were to run this method in a different class, it would return the value false. And then, as we go down to the set methods, I have set firing. Public void set firing, it accepts a Boolean value, and it resets the value of firing in this class to whatever the value was passed, whether that's true or false. And then once we're done with this class, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next class, which would be our game screen again. So let's go back to our game screen. And we're going to look at some logic here. Now, you may have some errors, so don't worry about that just yet. As long as you're following and putting in the code, you should be good. And you definitely will have errors in this part as we sort of go through here and add some new things. So let's go to the, I believe it's called the update running method here. Let's see. It's this one right here. Yep, update running. So in update running, we're going to go down to this else if here. Else if inbounds event 0, 350, 65, 65. In here, some of this code already exists, but in here, I edited it slightly. So I added the isRandom animation dot set current frame 0. You will have an error on this, but just make sure you add it, and then I'll explain it in a couple minutes. IsRandom dot set anim time to 0. Robot shoot should already be in there. Robot dot set firing true. All right. And then we'll scroll down a little bit more. Past this comment here. Then we add this section. So if the robot is moving right equals false, and the robot is jumped equals false, and the robot get firing equals true, then I nest another if in there. If isRandom.getCurrentFrame is less than or equal to 4, go ahead and run the animation. If it's not, then set robot set firing to false, isRandom set current frame to 0, isRandom set anim time to 0. Make sure your braces are according to this, and we have a couple errors, probably we'll definitely here and here, and maybe in some other places as well, but once we get to the animation class, we should have that all hammered out. So let's go to the animation class, and we're going to add a couple methods, and these are at the end of the class, so if you look here, we're going to add these methods down here at the end. We're going to do get current frame, set current frame, and set anim time. So basically what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to find out what frame am I on. I want to be able to set the current frame, so if I don't like the frame number I'm on, I go ahead and I can set it back to 0. Now the reason why I want to do that is because if I'm shooting and then I shoot again really quickly, instead of shooting a bullet out of a smoking gun, it would go back to the flash point, the very first picture. So it would be a little bit more realistic in a rapid fire situation. And then of course this last method here, public void set anim time, because anim time and current frame are sort of synchronized. If they're not both on the same time setting, basically, your animations will act awkwardly. So go ahead and make sure you have these three methods typed in. I'll go back to the game screen class and I'll kind of explain this a little bit more clearly. Hopefully it'll give you a little bit more understanding, because this is kind of the tricky part of a slightly more complicated animation than just walking or something like that. Because we've got to make sure that, hey, we're not walking, we're not jumping, we're not ducking, we are ready to fire, and indeed we are firing idle. Okay, so if we look back at this, so I do that, I make sure we're not ducked, I make sure we're not jumping, and I make sure that we definitely are ready to fire the gun. And then I go ahead and I reset the animation for isRandom to the current frame 0 and the anim time 0, just to make sure that I'm at the 0 point. And then I go ahead and I allow the robot to shoot, and this shoot method is inside the actual robot Java class, so if you wanted to look at that, you could see what goes on there. And then robot.setFiring to true, that's the method that we created. And what this lets us know, in my thought process, is that, hey, we are indeed firing, so it's okay to run that idle firing animation, or any kind of firing animation, but right now the idle is the only one that we have set up. And then, as we come down here, and we get a little bit more in depth here with our shooting. Okay, so now I'm saying, okay, we're definitely not moving right, and we're not jumping, and the firing equals true. Go ahead and run the animation as long as the animation is basically no greater than 5, so less than or equal to 4. Once it gets to 5, it resets back. And as long as it's less than that 5, basically, the current sprite is the get image of the is random animation. If this isn't the case, now notice that this is nested, so if I'm not moving right and I haven't jumped and my set firing is true, but my frames are over, then I'm going to set my firing to false, because what that basically means is I've gone through my animation, my idle animation at least once, so that it doesn't just keep repeating, and I want to reset my current frame and my anim time to 0 just in case I hit the shoot button again. So that way it starts from the beginning as opposed to giving me some weird behavior. So that's all there is to the code part of that. I hope a little bit of it makes sense. Again, I would really make a push for you to go back to that Unit 2, Day 8, and read a little bit about that animation. I think especially if you look at the current frame and the anim time, that should probably help you understand a little bit of this a little bit more. All right? Good. One last suggestion I'm going to make for you, just so you make sure you can kind of understand maybe how the code's running. I would go ahead and I would comment this out and then go ahead and run it either on your BlueStacks or your Android device and see the difference in what's happening. So that's essentially the reason why we created the get firing and the set firing method inside the robot. So we had a way to turn off and turn on those animations. So go ahead and give that a shot, and anytime you see variables or even literal variables that you want to go ahead and just edit a little bit, just so you can test the behavior of the program. All right, hope that helps.